Hi everyone, Rose Wildsmith here. Today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful distressed paper, which is in the style of chenille, which you usually make with fabric. So what you're going to need is some different papers. You want them to be all slightly different in texture. I've got some craft paper, some music paper, this shiny paper which is actually an origami paper. This is wrapping from toilet paper. This is a dyed with Protein dye piece of kitchen roll. And if you want to see another idea for what to do with this, then I'll put the link up here for another video where I use these. This is some tissue paper type thing. Oh, it's quite thin, look. So you want papers that aren't too thick. So, I mean, this is probably the thickest, this music paper, and it's still quite thin. The craft paper is quite thin. You don't want anything that's going on towards cardstock, so just bear that in mind. And the other thing to bear in mind is that the smallest piece of paper you have, which is this one, is going to be the biggest that you can make your piece altogether. So I'm going to cut everything down so that they're all exactly the same size. Okay, we'll see whether this is enough pieces. I hope it is. So I've got 6 pieces here, and then you want to order them. And what you want to bear in mind is that the one on top is going to be the kind of overall colour of the piece, and all the other ones you're just going to get little glimpses of them as they poke up from underneath. So choose which one you want to be the kind of dominant colour of the piece. I think I would probably like to have something quite neutral on the top. I feel like I want to have the green on the top, and I feel like it would be nice to have this shiny one poking up from underneath and kind of giving a bit of a surprise element. On the back it isn't shiny, so we'll have to see whether that works. So I'm going to have the green one on the top, and then you can actually see through this a little bit, so that might be quite interesting to be able to see the musical notes through it a little bit. I want to split these two up because they're very similar. So let's go for this one next, because this one's quite similar to this one in texture. Let's go for the shiny one next. Or maybe we could have this one on the bottom, because you don't actually cut the bottom. So if we have this one on the bottom, then it will shine through from underneath, and we won't risk just the other side poking through. You'll see what I mean when we get to that stage. So let's go for this next, then this, then this. So you want to make like a little stack. There we go. And now I'm going to get my sewing machine. I've just got an ordinary cotton thread on my machine. It's brown, which I think is fine. There's brown in this. We'll see whether that makes much of a difference when I get going. I'm going to put the stitch length up a little bit, because at the moment it's on 2.2, and I think this one will maybe want it to be about 3 or so. And the other thing is I'm going to change my needle, because I've been doing sewing with fabric recently, and this is a brand new needle. And just a little tip, I've started to save my old sewing needles here, and I've written paper, because the paper is going to blunt your sewing needles really quickly. So you don't want to use your lovely new needles that you're going to use for sewing quilts and things for sewing paper. So I'll just put that to one side. Rethread this. All right, so I'm going to start by just sewing a diagonal line all the way across to kind of secure everything in place. Right, now the next line that you want to do, you want to leave about a centimetre gap in between. And then you just keep going like this until you've filled up your whole sheet. Okay, so there we have it. Now I'm going to put the sewing machine and we'll go on to the next step. Oh, before I do that, I must remember to change back my needle. Put it back in this so I don't forget. This is my paper needle. Okay, so for this next part, I'm going to use a stitch ripper, but you could also just use a small pair of scissors. I'm going to try using a stitch ripper because I think it's going to give more of a distressed and torn look, whereas the scissors will be a bit cleaner. But let's give it a go and see what happens. Now the idea is that you want to tear through all of the layers apart from the one right at the bottom. So that's going to be your base layer. And look, if you do this, it's just going to make sort of a smooth cut. But if you kind of pull up and you get a nice torn edge. So it depends what you'd prefer. You might want it to look quite neat, but I want it to look kind of distressed. So I'm going to do this tearing technique. Okay, it's the first layer. Let's see what the next one looks like. See whether I can do this with the stitch ripper. Yeah. Well, look, I'm tearing more than one layer at a time here. It wasn't intentional, but if it works, it works. I'm going to go for it. Actually, I might do one layer at a time so that each layer tears in a slightly different place, because I think that will add to the distressed look. Oops, it's really hard to just tear one layer. Let's see if I can. No, it seems like it wants to come up as a pair. Fine. All right. I want to open them up. That's already looking kind of cool, isn't it? Now let's do the next layer. You can see why you don't want it to be too thick, can't you? Because you don't want it to be too hard to tear it at this stage. And I think if it was cardstock, it would be quite tricky. So that's why you want this quite thin paper. But you could always use cardstock for the bottom layer. That would give it a really nice, stable surface right at the bottom. But then it depends what you want to use it for, because that would kind of limit what you could do with it afterwards. Now I've got to be really careful when I get towards the end that I don't tear through the very bottom piece. In fact, I'm a bit worried that I might do that, so I think for this last one I'm going to use the scissors. Just so I have a little bit more control. There we go. Doesn't that look cool? And now you can see this shiny thing coming from underneath. So you could distress it even more by adding more rips into it. You could maybe scruff it up a bit with your finger. And then now I'm going to try and do the same for all of these different lines, so we get a really nice effect. Oops, I went through the backing there. It doesn't matter too much. You can always put a little bit of tape over it or something. You want to avoid that as much as possible to keep the integrity of the piece. I've done it again then. Oopsie. Seems like the scissors aren't actually helping that much. Looking cool. Look, I've torn it a few places there, so I'm going to just put a little bit of tape on the back here. Just to give it a bit more stability. Here we go, this is the finished piece, isn't it cool? You can just really see the potential with this, how you can add this into different projects. You can totally change the result by using different paper as well. Thanks for watching and hope you see you on the next video. Bye!